Fishing like a local isn't just about catching fish. It's about connecting with the environment and the people who call it home. It's about hearing the stories and traditions that have been passed down for generations and sharing unforgettable moments with the people you meet along the way. Fishing like a local is having an experience that stays with you forever. And with Fishing Booker, you can experience it too, no matter where you are. Discover your next adventure on Fishing Booker.
The 1911 is one of the most iconic firearms in history. Designed by John Browning, the 1911 was the standard issue sidearm of the U.S. military from 1911 to 1985. While Colt produced the original, almost every major firearm company has produced its own version. It's wildly revered for its reliability, crisp trigger, and is still a favorite for all types of shooters. Whether you're looking to buy or build a 1911 and just about everything for guns, log on to midwayusa.com.
Hello and welcome to the Publicly Challenged Podcast. I'm your host, Luke Oswald, and I hope you join me on my quest for knowledge to become a better public land hunter, angler, and forager. Stick with this and who knows, maybe we will learn something together. All right, Chris Gavin, welcome back to the podcast, my friend. And if anybody who doesn't know who Chris Gavin is, you're a jerk. Go back and listen to the episode you clearly didn't listen to in the previous episodes. But anyway, how's it going, man?
Oh, I'm living the best life ever, Luke. I'm glad to be back, and everything's going just awesome for me. Not too long ago, I was giving a lecture at UW-Madison on, I think it was ethnobotany and sustainability or something like that. And I was just talking to a whole bunch of college students, and I said, I'm living the best life ever. I'm just like smashing the bones and sucking the marrow out of life.
Nice.
And one of the students was like, whoa, that's a really powerful metaphor. And I was like, yeah, I guess it's that too. So I'm living the best life. I'm doing great.
That's awesome. Before we started recording, you were talking about how you were canoeing with some kids today. I've only gone out canoeing one time this year, and it was with my 4-year-old. So I'm a little jealous.
Oh man, yeah, I love canoeing. I lead a little bit of a charmed life because I still remember I was raised canoeing on the Wisconsin River and going up to Boundary Waters with my family. And I was talking to my mom a few years back, and she said, "Oh yeah, it was rough. We were too poor to like go on vacation, so we always just went camping." And she said it like a little bit embarrassedly, and I was like, I am not wanting for how I was raised. It was all good. And I still remember in high school, I took a group of my friends from the cross country team out to Lake Wingrove, one of our lakes right here in Madison, Wisconsin. And when you're raised doing things like camping or hunting or fishing or canoeing, you just kind of, at least I assumed everybody did that sort of thing. So, I put in the water with a bunch of my friends on a couple of, in the canoes, and they were like trying to figure out which end to get in, and I was like, guys, it's just paddling, come on. And then it was a little bit humbling for me. I was like, wait a minute, not everybody's been out paddling. And I think it was like a couple weeks later, I went out, one of my friends took me out, what's it called, water skiing, that's it. And that was my first time ever doing that, so I got to see what it's like when the shoe is on the other foot. I ate a lot of water that day, so yeah.
That's so funny. I grew up camping all the time as well, and when I met people later in life that had never camped, I was like, "What? Never camped? How's that even possible?"
You know what's crazy about that? Like, I didn't camp a whole lot as a kid, but in my teens, camped a lot, and most of it was my friends either just getting away. And they had a spot that was kind of a friend that owned a family farm or whatever, but they had this little oasis that was surrounded by a creek. A creek split and went around it, and it was like this little island, and we would camp on this island all the time and just hang out and have big bonfires. And of course later, into the later teen years, parties and stuff like that, and just overcrowd that little island. But that's when I did most of my camping, and I still to this day hate tent camping in the summertime. It is tent camping to me, like in the fall or like winter, I love it. In the summertime, I'm like, this is miserable. This is stupid. Why am I doing this? I would rather have a raging campfire and just lay down a tarp or like dig and put some coals underneath and then put dirt on and then put the tarp on top of that and sleep with like a blanket. And that's how we used to do it all the time. And occasionally we would pitch a tent, and every time I was like, I hate camping in a tent. I'd rather just lay next to the fire, you know? It's real weird.
What, I'm curious though. Why do you hate it so much? Because of how hot the tents get?
The tents get hot. The moisture, it's like sticky. Everything in there gets sticky from the moisture just being trapped. And then like you could lay outside and it's 10 degrees cooler, and you could just like I could lay next to a fire and just have a blanket on me with a tarp for the dew, you know, or a piece of Visqueen, which I used to do a lot. And then I was good and I wasn't even wet, and it's not a big deal. But like in the tent, everything just gets so wet and sticky. I hate it.
If there's no breeze and it's a warm, muggy night, oh, being in a tent, it really is the worst. I think just before the pandemic, my family and I headed down to the Grand Canyon area, and night number one was somewhere mid Iowa at a state park, which it was pretty cool, and it had bison there, I think. But it was one of those nights where the low was 85 or something like that, and you know, this was before Lily was born, but you know, it's 4 kids, my wife and I, and we're all like laying on top of all the sheets, like in like shorts or like with as little as we can get away with, and we're all just like, it's way too warm to sleep, and it's way too sticky and hot. So
because it was like I think it was like 60 something percent humidity, and I mean it did get down to like 60 that night. Like just recently I did it with my kids, and I'm like, this is so miserable. Why would anybody want to do this in the summertime? Yuck.
There's no breeze. That makes a big
it's terrible. But like in fall, like late fall changing into winter, oh man, I could sleep in a tent for a month at a time and love it.
I think that your hatred for that, and maybe you too, Chris, as most of your camping maybe has been done in places that are a little bit more warm. Like my association with camping is like a ton of camping in the UP, which like even in the middle of the summer is like most nights are like in the 50s.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is it humid though? Where you're at?
No.
Oh,
no
okay.
way, man.
See, humidity is what kills you. I hate humidity in a tent.
I agree. I on that same trip, we went down to Arches, was one of our first stops, and you know, still very warm at night, but not even a quarter as humid. It was just dry. Such a different experience. So I really think if it's still and humid, it could even be like 65, 70 degrees, and it won't be cool enough. And my personal experience too is oftentimes there's like a kid snuggling up next to me on one side. Yeah. Sometimes on the other side too, and invariably like one throws their elbow up over my mouth or something like that. So it's, you know, that's the fast life of the biologically successful, but yeah.
Yeah,
so,
no, I get it.
Chris, you're talking about having kids snuggle. I was literally just before I got on here reading to my daughter a book to go to bed, and it's like 85 degrees here or something and super humid, and she's sitting there pushed up against me reading the book, and I'm like, ugh.
Yeah, and I mean, and if you're uncomfortable with your own kid, you know that's just miserable, because you know, if it's your own kid, you know, you don't mind cuddling till, you know, for hours on end, but when they're all sticky and clammy and grimy and probably have some peanut butter behind their ears too.
Oh yeah.
I'm very confused actually how people in the South survive.
It amazes me. Like, I talk to people all the time who are like, how do you live up in Wisconsin? How do you live in Minnesota? How do you live in like the upper Midwest? And I'm just like, I'll take the winter anytime. Like, it is not a problem compared. I've lived down in coastal North Carolina for 2 or 3 years. I've lived down in Miami for a couple of years. Just about every place has its charm, but I really love it up here in the upper Midwest. The nice cool weather. I live for it.
Yeah,
So.
me too.
So Miami.
Yeah.
What was that like? That had to have been like so muggy.
That's actually fast paced though, in Miami.
Yeah, it was a girl. So
it was a girl.
Yeah,
it was in his disco era.
Well, I mean, now she's my wife, and she decided that we were going to move back up to Wisconsin. It was one of those things where when I got out of the Marine Corps, she was wrapping up her last semester of college, and her last semester turned into her last 4 semesters, as college often does. So, but yeah, when she wrapped up, we decided to move to Wisconsin. When she came up here, she's a Midwesterner at heart. So even a lot of her roots kind of go back here, even if her folks were raised down there. So she loves it here. She loves the people here. I mean, you guys know how it is. We've got things like the whole Midwest passive aggressive. I had to move away and come back before I could see it, and I was like, wow, that really is a thing. But but folks are so friendly around here. You wave and they wave back. When I was living in California or Miami, I'd wave at people and they'd look at me like I had a third eye or something. So
I think that all depends on how rural you are or population density in the Midwest, though. Because when you get to the big cities, especially Chicago, right? Everything's hustle bustle. Everybody's rude. Nobody cares about anybody else. It's all like just looking out for yourself and going. It's like the California mindset,
Yeah.
Or even like I've noticed Arizona is like that too. But like you get further south and like things slow down a little bit and people will wave to you. But if you, and I learned that when I was like a teenager and you'd go somewhere and it was common, you knew everybody in your hometown. So you just naturally waved and you'd go somewhere else and get near the city and you'd be like, oh, hey, wave. And people just look at you like, I don't know you. I'm not talking to you. Who are you? You weirdo, and it's like, what's going on here? It took a while to learn that not that many people are as friendly as you think, unless you get a little more spread out,
Yeah, it's true. And Florida is really interesting because especially with Miami being a big cosmopolitan city, it's one of the few places where the further north you go, the further south you go.
Oh, wow.
Yeah,
that makes sense.
Yeah, exactly. But the natural beauty down there, I mean, in a lot of ways, it's a sportsman's paradise.
Yeah.
I mean, the deer are a little bit smaller, but the turkey are there. There's black bear there. And the fishing is just phenomenal down there. Foraging is different down there, though. You'd think that being a semi-tropical area with a really long growing season, you'd think it'd be wonderful, but it really isn't. Areas like the Everglades, just sawgrass for miles and miles.
Yeah.
And there's really cool plants down there that you don't see elsewhere, like sea grapes and cocoa plums and pond apples. But aside from that, without a strong seasonal signal like we have up here, you don't just have it raining food periodically like acorns or walnuts or things like that. And of course, our whitetails here in Wisconsin are like twice the size of deer down in Florida. So that's kind of nice if you're going to go through that effort of dropping one in the woods. So
you were a forager while you were down there?
I was a forager, yes. I was not a hunter. I can size up the deer. I'm an adult onset hunter. I started hunting in my mid-20s, right after I moved back to Wisconsin from Florida.
Luke hates that saying.
What's that?
Luke hates that saying.
Sounds like a disease or something.
Adult onset hunter.
It's like onset diabetes,
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Adult onset. Even now, they don't even call that adult onset diabetes anymore because it affects so many kids these days.
Oh,
but,
yeah, right.
No, I don't mind it. I mean, I love the fact. I think it's very interesting when people do come to hunting as an adult because they come to it from a different approach. they may not have the same ties. They may not have that same um, history, that woven fabric of history and tradition and everything else, but they come to it with a lens, and a lot of times it's an ecological lens, right? And I think that's
Yeah.
really, really cool because it's a different perspective and it still offers the same passion, and they tend to take to it a lot faster than a teenage kid would that's hit or miss and too busy chasing girls, even though dad still wants to keep them hunting. You come to it because you come to it on your own and you want to learn and retain as much as you possibly can. And I think that's
Yeah.
cool. Yeah.
Yeah, and for me, I started hunting just as I started college, and my degree was in wildlife ecology. And at a school like Madison, like white-tailed deer are front and center and everything. And my population dynamics professor was, a self-described deer nerd. Like everything was all about deer. All of the grad students working under him in his lab were doing like bone marrow analysis and stuff like that. So for me, it was neat to be learning not just about how to hunt deer, but also like their ecological impacts that you don't really get to see unless you spend an obscene amount of time in the woods, or just how their population cycles would look on a graph and stuff like that. So it was a steep learning curve, but a very rich one, with a lot of different angles being presented, and then just the woodmanship. So I was really fortunate, in a way. I was raised in a household where butter knives were almost considered too sharp for kids to handle and whatnot. So, and my parents were a little disappointed, to say the least, when I joined the Marine Corps. But my maternal grandfather, who had also been a Marine and was a hunter, was not only thrilled that I joined the Marine Corps, but shortly after coming out, when I moved back to Wisconsin and said, "Hey, I wanna learn how to deer hunt." He was like over the moon. He was very happy about that. So I was really fortunate to start hunting, a few years before he passed. So, it's, I mean, you guys know how it is when you drop that first deer in the woods and you have no idea how you're gonna field dress it. It really, you need a mentor. No video or YouTube video or anything, or guidebook or anything like that's really gonna work half as well as having your uncle and your grandfather sitting there
I don't
show like,
know. I didn't have that. I really didn't.
no.
But ever since, so I was like 8 years old and, pretty much just learned how to like read, right? And like started
Mhm.
reading books on my own. And my dad's like, "Here, kid, you'll like this one." And it was FM 76 or 2176, the Army Field Manual on Survival.
Oh
And
yeah, yeah.
and I just I've still got the original one, and I had to duct tape the spine because it's just falling
Yep.
apart because I read it so much as a kid, and I just studied like the field dressing of the deer and just all this stuff, and I thought it was so cool. I ate cattail shoots for the first time because of that book. That was probably
Yep.
actually my first foraging thing, before I actually wanted to be a forager. Just stuff like that. I thought it was so fascinating. But then, like when it came time and I actually dropped a deer. My buddy was with me, and he was just like holding the leg. And I went to town and did it with a K bar, And he's like, and I even went and right on the rib cage and just took my fist and pounded it along and split the rib
Yep.
cage open right there and everything. And he's like,
Yep.
"Wow, like did I'm you how?" And I go, "I don't know. I just know, man. I've been looking at it long enough. I kind of just figured it out." And he's like, he goes, "Lukey, I was actually impressed."
That's pretty cool. I do remember that manual. I haven't seen it in
Oh man,
years, but
mine's probably sitting somewhere on a shelf right around me somewhere.
it's funny
Chris,
that you
well,
mentioned that though, Luke, because I would say on the foraging side of things, about midway through the Marine Corps, when I was stationed at Camp Lejeune, North Carolina, I encountered high bush blueberries, which they looked familiar enough that I knew they were blueberries, but they were different enough from what we've got in Wisconsin that I knew I needed to like look them up. But also that same field guide and cattails and the tank trail ditches, cattails were one of my first wild foods that I was digging up the rhizomes on the tank trails and looking them up because they were in that guidebook.
In the cancer
'Cause I didn't-
water? Oh no.
Yeah, probably. Yeah. Yeah. There's a lot of things I got exposed to in my time in the
Yeah, no
military.
kidding.
So yeah. Yeah. If I make it another like 20, 30 years without catching cancer, I'm gonna consider myself pretty lucky. So
Absolutely.
I
All the
lead a
batteries they
pretty
had you
clean life
burn and
now.
everything else probably.
Man. I was fortunate. I was not involved with any of those trash burning things
Oh,
and stuff.
yeah.
But I was around a Humvee that was on fire one time though, and coughing up black stuff for a
Oh yeah,
couple
I'm sure
hours
that was
after
healthy.
that. So, yeah, but yeah.
So, Chris, I want to get back real quickly to the deer thing.
Yeah.
What was your first gutting experience
Oh,
like?
yeah.
Oh, sure. Well, my first gutting experience ever was me standing over my mom's cousin as he showed me how it was done. And then, like, I think it was a day or two later that we got the party got a few others, but I wasn't like with them. We were drive hunting and up in northern Wisconsin. So a couple days later, during Wisconsin's gun season, I got one, and that one I cut open with a lot of encouragement and direction from I think my grandpa or one of my uncles. And then it was about my third or fourth one that I was, feeling pretty confident on, and I don't think I was solo hunting probably until 4 or 5 years later when I started hunting in southern Wisconsin, at least part of the season and getting into bow hunting. That I was doing it all by myself, but by then it really felt pretty natural and you guys know how it is. Like the more you do it, the more it just like feels like just a normal part of your life, right? A few years back, I had one of my sons in the deer blind with me, and I usually I'm up in a tree, but I had the blind so that they could fidget to their heart's content and block the wind a little bit. And, looked across the little ridge in Wisconsin's driftless area, and there were 5 deer lined up, and I had 6 tags. And about 3 minutes later, 4 of them were on the ground. So
Nice.
we walked up on them, and I started field dressing it right in front of my son. And he was like, "Dad, this is like disgusting and exciting at the same time." I'm like, "Yeah." And at that point, all that practice like really came in handy because I had 4 deer to field dress and drag. It was only like only a couple 100 meters to drag them, but they were all field dressed and on the tray on the back of the car like an hour, 2 hours later or so. So yeah.
Nice.
Yeah, what about you, Clay? You started hunting fairly recently, right? In your adult life, at least.
In my adult life, but I'm 41 and I started hunting in my mid 20s. So
Okay.
yeah, so I have been hunting I don't know, almost maybe like 16 years, something like that. But I didn't shoot my first deer until 2015 or 2016. So I had been hunting squirrels and just mainly squirrels. And then I shot that first deer, and just like you, I had been shown one time. Only I didn't have anybody with me when I shot my first deer.
Oh no.
So I was just like, I'm just gonna figure this thing out.
Yep.
And I did, and I think I cut the bladder and like spilled pee like on the
That's all right.
inside. And then
Yeah,
I just there was snowfall, so I like rubbed
yeah.
snow inside and
Oh, that's the best. That is so nice when you got some fresh snow that you can just take and wipe around on the inside and just clean everything out and cool it
Yeah.
off extra fast too.
Yeah.
There's a
Yeah.
lot of people too. The first animal that I ever shot was a white-tailed deer, and I hear a lot of people say, "Oh, it's so nice if you're learning how to hunt to start with squirrel or something, a rabbit or something kind of small." And I get that to a degree, but I also think that cutting your teeth on white-tailed deer is kind of nice because I I've been turkey hunting for about 10 or 12 years now. But I remember the first time I got a turkey, it was so nice to already know how to reach up inside a body cavity. And with white-tailed deer, it's kind of like the Duplo blocks, right? It's like yeah, it's big, but it's super easy because it's so
Yeah.
big. Um, I think I would almost rather field dress a deer than, something mid-size or something small where I gotta like reach up with two fingers up in there and
Right.
be extra careful, and all the pizzas are a little tiny, and it's like, oh, did I leave a kidney in there? I can't even tell. So yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Me and the kids butchered 6 chickens a couple months ago.
Hmm.
And yeah, I remember, you're like reaching in and just with 2 fingers kind of dragging
Yep.
everything out.
Yep.
Yeah. Um, but yeah, do you guys do any of that, or are you just simply purely eating deer?
Oh no, we have chickens.
Oh, you do?
I mean, the chickens are named, so
Uh,
once they have a name, it's like, yeah, it's hard to kill anything. They're all layers, but on occasion we've got friends who call us up because they've got too many roosters on hand or something like that, and we've done a little bit of domestic turkeys before. So there's a little bit of that, but it's mostly hunting. As
okay.
far as the meat we encounter, squirrel, turkey, and deer are the big one. The big ones, goose and duck a little bit, grouse when I can get them. I don't know about you guys, but when I'm out hunting, it's always like I wish I had. I've been thinking about hunting a bit more with a combo gun because I feel like every time I'm out after deer, I see squirrel all over the place. And then when I go squirrel hunting, I see the deer. Or another great example is every single turkey I've ever gotten in the fall has been from the deer stand, and a turkey like wanders below me, and I happen to be in the right zone that I've got a tag for it. And I've taken three turkeys that way. Way more in the springtime when I'm targeting turkey, but in the fall, I just don't have, like, my eyes are all set on deer and squirrel and other things, and I don't go out turkey hunting, but I've gotten turkey because they wander below me. But
Yep.
it's I mean, it even bleeds out into foraging too. I can't tell you guys how many times a goose has flown right over my head because I found some interesting thing that I wanted to eat. It was like down in the marsh, and I set the shotgun down, or I'm looking down at something trying to identify some plant, and they fly right over my head or something like that. That has happened more times than I care to admit. And there's even weird ones too. Like one time I went out squirrel hunting, and I knew that there were wild grapes out there. So I took my berry hook and a 5-gallon bucket, and instead of coming out back with squirrels or grapes, I came up with turnips.
What?
And it was the weirdest thing. Like they were clearly not planted. It was like this. It was a weird sort of property where it was owned by the county and hunting was permitted, but they were clearly releasing out parts of it to a farmer to grow crops on. And the turnips weren't planted, but they must have been mixed in with the seed corn or something like that, because they were here and there all along the edge of the corn. And I went in there looking for squirrel and grapes, and the grapes had all been like cut or something. I don't know what happened to the grapes. They had been there a week earlier and they were gone then. But I came back with a 5-gallon bucket full of turnips. So I
Oh
know.
my.
That's funny.
I maintain a social media presence, and it's funny because when you go out foraging, and sometimes when you go out hunting, you know, you go out looking for something, but so often you come back with something else. I remember one time I went out looking for like chanterelles and black raspberries or something like that, and it was so unusual that I would come back with chanterelles and black caps, the two things I actually went out looking for. I did like a whole social media post about how for like the first time in ever, I went out looking for something and came back with those things versus something else. When I lead classes like forest to table classes, I tell people, if you want to know what you're going to eat for dinner, go to a restaurant. If you want to see what nature provides, or just kind of have an adventure, go out foraging or go out hunting, or who knows what you're going to come back with. Go out fishing, who knows what you're going to come back with. You might think you're going to bring back bluegill fillets, but instead you're going to end up pickling some pike because that's what you got on the line, right? So yeah, that's what's so cool about these wild endeavors. In my opinion, you gotta, so many of your meals have to be built from the ground up because you're not even sure what your key ingredients are gonna be, maybe even earlier that same day. So I find it to be like like a roller coaster of fun. So
Yeah. Um, the turnips thing. What did you do with them?
well, I'm gonna be honest. I cannot eat, and my family cannot eat 5 gallons of turnips. It would turn out. So I would say about half of them ended up going to pot.
Mhm.
But we did some mashed turnips, which
Mm.
were pretty good. I was impressed with that. I remember looking up a couple of European turnip recipes. So there were some stews that were involved. Um, and at this point, I'm wishing I could write it like had it written down somewhere. I'm working on a cookbook, but I don't think any of my turnip. I want to say there was a Pichelsteiner maybe recipe. There was something from Central Europe that I made with some of those turnips. So oftentimes with my foraging and hunting endeavors, it's the random ingredients that just pop up that end up guiding me because I'll like do a deep rabbit hole dive on Google or Wikipedia, and I'll be like, "What do you do with turnips?" And I'll look up places that have rich traditions of using turnips, whether it's some Mongolian recipe or something from like Slovakia or something like that, and I'll build around that. I was like, well, what do they do in Slovakia that involves venison? Because I've got some of that too, and that's how these things just get created. Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah, it's so much fun because it's like I don't go out with a plan. I just kind of make do with the ingredients that present themselves, and then it's good to be able to plug and play with a few things. Just know what can work where. So, for example, if you've got any recipe that calls for goat, just substitute braised venison in right there. Anything that calls for beef, you can typically use venison for too, within reason. So,
You know that like people who have never eaten venison before, and you give them something and they're like, "Ew, this is gamey."
yeah,
Like they
yeah.
can they can just like taste it. I actually prefer venison over beef, like
Mm-hmm.
any day of the week. Like
Yeah,
I
me
would I
too.
would I would rather have venison,
Mm-hmm.
and I don't even know what flavor they're talking about. Like I'm always like, I don't even know what you're talking about. Like I don't register it.
I,
I don't really register it so much anymore either.
I don't
I
think I
will
have
say I missed.
it. I think it depends on how you trim it and prepare it. I mean, if
Mhm.
if you're leaving a lot of the silver skin and the fat and things like that, that's going to take on a whole different profile than if you trim
Mm.
it and you've got a
Mhm.
perfectly red piece of meat. That's just clean meat. Same with catfish, though, right? If you have a
Mhm.
catfish fillet and you've got that pink meat on it or dark colored meat, and it's not that pure white meat, it's going to taste gross. And that's what most people have probably been served that have ever said catfish tastes gross.
Yeah,
So,
I agree, and it all depends on your preparation too. I mean, if you're gonna try to sear something but leave some of that silver skin on,
yeah.
that's gonna make a big difference. Whereas if you've got something like shanks that have so much of that fascia tissue, but you just braise the bejesus out of it with a lot of like good spices and stuff like that, then you won't notice it either. But I'm with you, Clay. I don't really register gamey flavor. I except muskrat. Yeah.
Oh yeah, we talked about that at the Great Lakes Foresters. Yeah.
When it comes to muskrat, and this is like, one of those things where 10 men, 10 tastes, because everybody's different. I have met people who I know for a fact are eating plenty of muskrat and they say it tastes great. They love it. Um, to me, a muskrat tastes like a catfish made love to a squirrel. And it's like, and I'm not talking about the best of either. I'm talking about the worst of both.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, yeah, and I've tried it so many times. And one time I had a muskrat that tasted like I felt like it tasted okay. So I don't know what was going on there. I mean, one thing for me personally is, and I think most people in our area, all my muskrats are coming out of traps. So I can't guarantee how fresh it really is. I can tell it's less than 24 hours because that's how often we have to check our traps in Wisconsin. But that might have something to do with it. I've heard it's really interesting because when you start like getting when you start talking to people who are like barely on the internet, you start hearing about like folk wisdom and stuff. And I remember talking with one guy about how muskrat goes belly green real fast, and I was like Googling belly green, and I could like barely find any references to it. But this guy who I was talking to, he mentioned it like it was like it was something just anybody would know. Like he said it
Coyotes are
as if
like that
someone
too.
said like he said it as if it was as common as like corn on the cob or something like that, right? and 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 I think I've even heard it from somebody else once too. But again, it was one of those like situations where it was like someone like living really close to the land. But the belly green, as near as I can tell, is this notion that like the meat starts to get an off flavor really fast from the gut contents, just kind of not necessarily spilling out, but just the microbial action of the gut contents will actually kind of spread kind of like the abdominal cavity version of bone sour, if you've ever heard of bone sour.
Mm-mm.
So if you don't drop the temperature of a larger animal pretty quick, like pig, or imagine it dies and you don't field dress it, so that core temperature staying pretty high for pretty long. The meat will take a real off flavor, and it oftentimes starts from the joints, which is why they call it bone sour.
I see.
And bone sour is another great example. Like you talk to old school farmers, and you're likely to encounter somebody who knows what bone sour is, or had a grandpappy who talked about bone sour. But you won't find that in a cookbook. You won't find that online easy. So it's I think it's one of those older rural terms that is kind of dropping out of common knowledge. At least that's what I suspect. So
What kind of
anyway,
traps? What kind of traps are you catching muskrats in? 110s?
110 kind of bears. Yep, I do.
Okay.
I do
Oh
almost
yeah, the old 110
exclusively
kind of
body
bird. Yep,
grips.
yep.
What's
It's
that?
nothing. I
Oh,
said,
come on, Luke.
no, I said, oh yeah, the old 110 encounter bear. Yep, yep, yep. Because
I mean,
Clay throws out the old 110 on every time he talks about trapping. What are you running? 110s? Yeah, yeah. So it's just
well,
my little
it's a
inside
muskrat
joke.
trap.
Yeah.
It's muskrat size. Yeah.
But
Yeah.
I was just curious if have you ever tried a colony trap?
No, no.
Okay, I have.
I started to build one once, and then I don't even know what happened to it. I
Hmm.
didn't even get it halfway done. But I'm familiar with the design because I started following one, and I got like halfway done, and it was one of. I mean, you guys know how some of those projects go that get started on in the garage, and then like you either
Oh, yeah.
cannibalize
I know
parts
those.
or yeah, yeah.
Colony traps are very successful, and I just wonder if maybe it's like better because it's submerged underwater. I don't know. And I also wonder if like maybe the taste of muskrat would be better later in the season, like in the winter when the water's like really cold.
Well, I mean, all my trap line running is done in the winter.
Oh, okay.
And,
Well,
and to top it all off, it's done and right now it's done in a, well, actually, always, because it was when I started, it was a different trout stream, but everything I run is in a trout stream, and the sets are even my sets are like typically in the water, even though the 110s don't have to be. So
mhm.
I run 110s, 220s, and 330s. I love eating beaver. I mean, it's
Oh,
just
beaver's awesome.
oh, it's so good. And it's funny because I was for a long time I was marveling about how different muskrat and beaver tasted, and I was just assuming that they were really closely related. And then not long ago, really just a few months ago, I was looking up like the taxonomy like family tree, and turns out muskrats are much more closely related with rats and mice than they are to beavers. I mean, they're all rodents, but the beaver is splits off quite a far ways back.
Hmm.
So yeah, but I think beaver tastes great. And then muskrat, I've tried it time and time again, and I still cook it up and give it to the dogs. But well, one dog won't touch the stuff even. But
Really?
well, that dog's picky. That dog doesn't eat fish. So it's funny. So my wife has this little Havanese, like this little lap dog that even she barely likes that thing. And it's the funny thing is that dog's picky and psychopathic and all sorts of things. But here's the thing, and that dog is like fixated on my wife. Does not have anything to do with me except during deer season. That dog is a venison junkie. When I come back from deer hunting, especially if like I've got the blood on the pants from field dressing and everything like that, that dog is like he's like, oh, we're besties. Yeah, and every time I get a leg of venison out of the freezer and it's been thawing for a day or so, that dog's like all over me. So yeah, it's a weird little thing, but
But he does not like muskrats.
no, that one won't eat muskrats. But my dog Nando, my American Water Spaniel, that he likes muskrat, or at least he tolerates it. I don't know. That dog
Yeah.
is so food oriented. So my dog's name is Nando Ishibe, which is Ojibwe for duck hunter.
Ah,
And I bought this dog when he was a puppy, just like months before my youngest daughter was born, and it was just a fool's endeavor. I don't know what I was thinking. So, there's this idea that, oh, well, I'll have a baby at home and I'll train a dog at the same time. Yeah. That dog, I've barely trained that dog anything related to duck hunting. But I think I'm gonna be lucky because that dog would do shameful things for food. So I do think that when I finally get the time to get around to training him, even though he's like 3 years old at this point, I think it will be okay because I mean that dog's just ridiculous when it comes to food. So
have you shot a gun around him?
I have, yeah, but only a 22.
Okay.
So, yep.
Yeah, that's always like hit or miss. My dog is perfectly fine around guns. Shotgun, 22, whatever. He's like, sweet, what'd you shoot? Where's it at?
Oh, that's awesome.
You know, um, but yeah, I've known people that have trained duck dogs and they've told me that they'll shoot a gun from a football field away,
Mm-hmm.
and then they have their partner walk them, 10 steps closer,
Mm-hmm.
and then shoot the gun, and all the while, you're good, don't worry,
Yep.
buddy.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah,
so
that's on my list of things to work on him with. I've even gotten kind of close. Like I've taken that dog is like attached to my oldest son. So we've gone out before, and rather than just shooting just for shooting's sake, I've been like hunting 100 yards away from them, but I've just
mhm.
we've never had a shot at anything. And then it was time to go, so I didn't bother doing that exercise. But it's on my radar to try something like that because you don't want to go through all that effort of training a dog only to take them out there and that first bane is right over their shoulder and it scars them for life. I've heard that can really ruin a hunting companion. So,
Yeah.
yep.
What is a water spaniel like? Take me through like what a water spaniel is, and is it kind of like just a different version of a retriever?
Yeah, so the American Water Spaniels are one of I think two or three breeds of a dog that actually started in North America.
Hmm.
I think the Chesapeake, is it the Chesapeake Lab? Is one of the other ones, and then there's the Labrador Retriever is another one. So the breed was actually developed in Wisconsin, near the Fox near the Fox River Valley,
Mm-hmm.
and it's designed to be a dog that can retrieve waterfowl, so it can handle cold water. And it's a medium-sized dog, so that you can take them out in like a canoe or a skiff, without them, swamping the boat getting in and out.
Oh,
So
I just looked up a picture. These are yeah, pretty interesting looking.
yeah, if you're familiar with Boinkins, which is I think the state dog of South Carolina, a lot of people think that Boinkins pretty much came from American Water Spaniels. There's stories about there being like a couple dogs that were like left in a ditch somewhere in South Carolina, um, a few generations after it was developed in Wisconsin, and
Hmm.
a Boinkin is pretty much like a slightly warmer water version of an American Water Spaniel.
Hmm.
And they've got a little bit of poodle in them. You can kind of see a lot of them have a mullet that they're kind of rocking. So
I noticed.
yeah, you can see it. So it, it's uh it's something else to comb out, but yeah, a pretty cool dog on the whole. I'm behind in getting that dog trained. Again, it's one of those projects. One of my problems is I'm a real generalist, I mean, you guys probably gathered, I don't go real deep into any one thing. I'm a pretty good forager, but not the best. I'm a pretty good hunter, but not the best. I'm a pretty good trapper, but not the best. I would not go so far to say I'm a pretty good angler. I'm a middling angler at best. But I do a lot of camping and canoeing and all sorts of things, and it gets to be one of those things where I spread myself a little thin. So yeah, I think it was a little ambitious when I picked up a retrieving dog, and I was like, oh, I'll train him. I probably should have, would have, could have hired someone to help me with that, or taken him to classes, and maybe we'll get around to it still. But I think that was I bit off a little more than I could chew with that particular endeavor.
So, speaking of biting off things you could chew, I'm going to change it up a little bit. We're going to pivot from dogs. Um,
Yeah,
did you try any cicadas this year?
I did not. Right in my immediate vicinity, there weren't any of the periodic ones. And when I say in my immediate vicinity, I mean like in my backyard or the nature preserve right across the way. I do know that they popped up at a place like 10 miles down the road, but I just didn't make it. I didn't make it a priority to get down to the county park where they were emerging from and give them a try.
Yeah,
I have to
I
say, on
didn't
the
either.
whole, I'm not turned off by the notion of eating insects, but I also like, just I'm not going out of my way. I've tried I think it's Tim Clemens has a recipe for some spicy Japanese beetles, and I tried that maybe 5 or 6 years ago. And I am not the kind of person where mouthfeel is usually an issue, but unless I pull, and the crunchiness wasn't the problem, but if I didn't pull off their legs,
Oh,
the
the little
little the
hairy,
little the
yeah.
little tiny hooks, the little
Ugh,
tiny hooks on their legs, on my tongue just did not feel right. So,
I
and,
get it.
everybody's different. I eat bed straw, and I mean that's almost like Velcro. But that just wasn't working for me. Time was a lot, like, I don't know, in my like early 20s, late teens, I would just grab bugs and eat them, almost like just to shock value, like, shock my
Right.
friends and whatnot. And I remember one time I think I was like high school cross country or something like that, and I grabbed a moth and shoved it in my
Ugh.
mouth.
Whoa.
And oh well, yeah,
Ugh.
and it was one of the worst tasting things I've ever encountered. And after that experience, I was like, wait a minute. Maybe these insects actually have defensive chemicals, and maybe I should not just be doing that, maybe, you know. So, I mean, granted, I'm pretty sure I was about 17 at the time. I don't know about you guys, but 17, I mean, pretty much everything from about 15 to 21, my brain was half fried on testosterone.
Yeah.
There's I when I moved back to Wisconsin, I started like running into people from high school, and I've also, when Facebook came out, I started reconnecting with people from the Marine Corps, and I'd like to think I'm an all right guy now, but there was several people that I was reconnecting with when like Facebook and social media first became a thing. I was like, Oh, that's a person I need to connect with and probably owe a few apologies to. So yeah.
Yeah.
So it goes.
Yeah, that testosterone hits you hard, man. I remember being in high school, and I
Mm.
remember just like this one time seeing a girl and just being like, "Oh my God," like just like overwhelmed with like how can they put us in the same room together? How do
I
they?
people talk about like I'll never understand like we talk about how a lot women have this reputation. Things are getting better now, but have had it where hormones or they're too
Uh,
emotional. Like there's that societal stereotype that we have that women are hormonal and stuff like that. It's like we men are pretty hormonal too. I remember probably about 3 or 4 years ago, we were driving down the highway, and my wife's it was April or so, and my wife's like, "How come there's all these dead turkeys on the side of the road? Like that's the fifth one I've seen on this stretch of highway." And I was like, "Well, it's the same reason you see all those dead deer in early November." And like, and she's like, "Wow, being a guy is not actually all that easy, is it?" It's like,
Nope.
no. We get dumb, and all sorts of things when, yeah. So,
yeah.
yep.
But what's actually kind of amazing to think about is they've done all the studies to show that like you and me and Luke probably have lower testosterone levels than like historic 80-year-olds.
Oh, I don't know. I hear about like how stress and chemicals and the like microplastics and stuff like that. So,
Yeah. The
yeah.
that book I think I mentioned it to you possibly when we were at the Great Lakes Foragers gathering, but it's called Countdown by Shanna Swan.
I think you did mention it. Yeah, it
Yeah.
sounded somewhat similar to a book that I had read. Somewhat similar. I read a book several years ago called "Slow Death" by Rubber Ducky, and and like it's the whole book is about like phthalates and other chemicals
Oh yeah.
that are found in things like rubber ducks
Yeah.
that
Yep.
just are getting out in the environment, which is like I think I'm with like-minded individuals and probably anybody listening to this, like conservation's pretty high up there on the list. And when I look at how blithe our society is about single-use plastics, and just the other day I was, I knew that synthetic fibers for clothing and whatnot were a significant contributor to microplastics in waterways because when we launder them, little tiny pieces break off and go right through the sewage treatment plant. But I wasn't sure how it ranked or whatever. And when I googled it, anytime you Google anything, take it with a grain of salt, right? But most sources had um, uh, single-use plastics and synthetic textiles vying between number one and number two for primary sources for all the microplastics that are getting into our environment. So, I
Wow.
mean, bringing things full circle, and that's why I was out trapping muskrats so I could make mittens and
Yeah.
hand warmers and things like that. So, um, I really in everything I do, I always try to think like, is this something I can do with cotton or wool or linen or some natural fiber? And it doesn't always work. I recently got back into scuba diving, and you're just not going to make a whole lot of scuba gear out of leather. It just
Or
doesn't work.
sealskin.
So there's I'm trying to be accepting of the fact that it doesn't work to be a purist, but
Mhm.
that's what so many different things like there's so many different things that you really can't be 100% anything. Like I know Clay, like one of the things you're keen on is invasive exotics, and you can try to control them, but if you try to eliminate them, you're you know we can try to limit the plastics that we have in our that we use, but I'm not going to advocate that hospitals not use plastic
Yeah.
or that we don't use plastic on various different things. I've got a trip planned pretty soon up to Isle Royale National Park,
Oh,
and
badass.
Yeah, I could take the 25, 30 pound canvas tent or the 3 pound nylon tent. Yeah, so it's being a purist, you end up shooting yourself in the foot sooner or later. It's good to
Yeah.
have these goals that you move towards, but when you try to like get what was that? I remember an ecologist once told me that when you try to get down to zero on anything, zero is always a very, very small number. So it's
What's the most valuable thing in the world? Being able to fish with your family and friends. Exactly. And what's the second most valuable thing? Time. Managing and worrying about body odor used to take up a lot of my time. I was paranoid about smelling, especially around midday. It was all extremely time consuming. But not anymore. Since I switched to Mando whole body deodorant, I've freed up so much time. I've been able to teach my son and his friends how to fish, and I've even mastered some new fly fishing techniques. Yeah, it's that effective and long lasting. Here's why. Mando doesn't cover up odor after the fact with heavy fragrances like certain other deodorants. It stops odor at the source by blocking the bacteria on your skin from eating your sweat, which is the actual cause of BO. What does this mean? It means Mando is clinically proven to control odor for up to 72 hours. That's a long time. So give yourself the precious gift of time and get yourself some Mando whole body deodorant. New customers get $5 off Mando's best-selling starter pack with code WAYPOINT at shopmando.com. What I like most about Mando is that it's American-made. Mando whole body deodorant is powerful enough for the toughest body odor, but gentle enough to use everywhere without any worry because Mando is aluminum-free and baking soda-free. Mando's starter pack is perfect for new customers. It comes with a solid stick deodorant, cream tube deodorant, 2 free products of your choice, like mini body wash and deodorant wipes, and free shipping. Luckily, I have a discount code to help you get hooked on my favorite smelling whole body deodorant on the market. New customers get $5 off a starter pack with our exclusive code. That equates to over 40% off your starter pack. Use code WAYPOINT at shopmando.com. shopmando.com.
This episode is brought to you by our good friends at NFL Sunday Ticket on YouTube TV. I'm sure by now you've all gotten back into your Sunday routines, but they could be even better. With NFL Sunday Ticket and YouTube TV, you get the most live NFL games all in one place, every game, every Sunday. And you can even watch up to 4 different games at once with multi-view, one of my favorite inventions of this decade. It's exactly what you need to catch all the action. Make your Sundays more magical. And also, YouTube TV is great. I got it this year. It's awesome. Sign up now at youtube.com/BS. Device and content restrictions apply. Local and national games on YouTube TV. NFL Sunday Ticket for out-of-market games excludes digital-only games.
really difficult to eliminate 100% of anything from your life. So
Yeah. No, for real. Like the plastic thing is, it's like alarming, scary, but yeah, you're not going to get rid of it. I mean, the laptop I'm recording on is plastic. It's like, what am I going to make a wooden one? So that,
yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Not to mention, they just recently found a link between microplastics and ED in men, and in cadaver. What do you call the tubes on the side of the phallus that fills up with engorges with blood actually get lodged with plastic and actually becomes part of the reason why they can't become erect.
Huh.
So
Yeah.
very interesting.
Yeah, another reason.
So
to watch
it may be
plastic
maybe
consumption.
even more detrimental than we even realize at this point. But I got to ask a question because it goes all the way back to when we were talking about Miami, and it made me think of the Florida Keys, and you're talking about the foraging and the key limes, right? So I just recently saw they made a traditional key lime pie.
Uh-huh.
And so the traditional key lime pie, and I don't know if you're familiar with it or not, but they used... The sailors would make key lime pie. They'd take their cup, that they would drink out of, sleeping in the hammocks on the ships or whatever. But so the bread would go stale. They would take the bread, they would crush up the bread, which was dry and crusty at that point, crush it up into a bunch of pieces and put it in the bottom of their cup. Then they would always have condensed milk on the ships in cans. They would pour condensed milk into it. They would take seabird eggs, crush those up and put them in there, shell and everything, just mash them up, and then they'd squeeze the lime juice on top of all of it and eat it. And that was the original key lime pie.
That was the original, huh?
And so, yeah, in my head, I'm like, man, that sounds disgusting. Plus, like a seabird. I can't imagine eating a seabird, right? You talk about muskrat being bad. What do you think a seabird egg probably tastes like? It's got to be briny.
I can only imagine. I did actually cook up a cormorant one time. No, no, sorry, no, it wasn't a cormorant. It was a merganser.
Okay,
I misspoke. It was it might as well have been a cormorant. It tasted fishy.
Yeah.
But yeah. It's funny though. I don't know. It's possible. I also in another life I used to work at a wildlife rehabilitator down in Miami. I was a volunteer, and we mostly dealt with pelicans that had like fishing lines stuck in their wings or ate something that was too big for them to swallow or something like that, right? And when we pull in, there was like a dozen or 2 dozen pelicans in the pen, so a whole bunch of them, real close proximity. And you'd pull up there, and it would just reek, you know.
Yeah.
And then probably about 20 minutes after being there, you wouldn't even notice. You would just like that fast. I was amazed at how fast you would just not notice. And then you would get in your car and drive home. And you take the scrubs that you wore off, take a shower, and then you could smell the scrubs, you know.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, things do take on the flavor of what they eat. And I sometimes wonder, you know, bringing it back, all these different connection points, right? I wonder about the muskrats because, you know, the beaver seem to eat a lot of actual like wood and cambium, whereas the muskrats tend to eat a lot more of just like plants from down in the muck at the bottom and maybe
clams and fish and yeah.
I don't know.
They eat a lot of yellow pond lily.
Huh.
The tubers.
Is pond lily good?
No.
I don't know. I've never had pond.
No, I'm yellow pond lily. I don't think is the. Have you guys ever seen them? The muskrats dislodge them.
Okay.
And Clay, like, correct me if I'm wrong, because I sometimes get my pond lilies and lotuses. Like, I can tell when I look at them which ones are edible, but I forget the names for each different one. But those are the ones with the long tubers that like are about wrist thick. That almost look like a pineapple on the side.
Yeah.
That's interesting because I remember you guys are probably familiar with Les Stroud.
Yep.
Like, I usually just steer clear of paying any attention to those TV personalities and whatnot. But I think he was on PBS or something like that, and he had a show where he partnered with a chef and they would go out places.
Mm-hmm.
And my wife was like, "Oh, you got to check this out. I think this might actually be up your alley," because she knows I don't like really like I'm not into Bear Grylls or Dave Canterbury or any of those types. But I remember watching an episode, and they were like up in southern Canada or northern Minnesota or something like that, and they harvested that tuber, that the rhizome or whatever it is, and I was like, oh, that's in the Peterson Field Guide to Wild Edibles, but I know that is not edible. I've read in like Sam Thayer's books and others that like you do not eat that, and then they went on to say, oh yeah, we harvested this and ate it a few years back, and we all got sick. So now what we're gonna, but they're like, but it's in the field guide. So now we're gonna like take just a little bit of the juice and put it in like a cocktail or something like that. And they didn't get sick, but they were like all sitting there trying to convince each other that it's like, yeah, it wasn't that bad. It was kind of good because we just used a little of the juice. And it was just like, oh.
Les Stroud seems like a genuine dude, though.
Yeah, except for the Bigfoot stuff. I think that totally crashed his career. Is when he started doing. He started doing a whole bunch of the Bigfoot stuff, and then that kind of tanked him. Yeah.
Yeah, he though I saw in Survivor Man one time he ate raw what inky caps. He ate like just
Oh,
so many. I think he was
uh-huh.
like like a lot of people don't realize that when he was doing Survivor Man, I'm pretty sure that was like legit. Like he was just out there starving.
Probably.
And I think he like filmed himself eating like maybe like five or six. I'm forgetting the name of them. Inky caps. What do we call those? Like,
Like Shaggy Manes?
shaggy manes. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. He
I think Inky Cap's same.
Yeah.
yeah. But either way, shaggy manes. Yeah, he ate like five or six of them raw, and I was like, ugh, I don't think that's a good idea.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um,
Well,
But
I do know there are a few wild mushrooms that you can eat raw. I've heard and have tried chanterelles. But the funny thing is like taste is subjective, so I get that. But my personal opinion is that all mushrooms taste better cooked anyway. And it's just straight science that all mushrooms are more bioavailable in terms of nutrients after they're cooked. And then of course there's all sorts of mushrooms that um, are only safe to eat if they're cooked. Like morels will make you sick as a dog if you don't cook them first. So, and then of course there's a whole bunch of mushrooms. I don't have to tell you guys. There's a whole bunch of mushrooms. It doesn't matter if you cook them; they're still gonna put you 6 feet up.
what was the one Tim made the other day just for pure science? What was that he was?
Oh, I remember seeing that. Oh, it was the vomiter, maybe.
Something. I
Something,
don't remember.
yeah.
I want to know the results of that.
Yeah.
Nothing was ever posted about what happened. I'm curious.
I thought he said he was okay. That when he did that, it kind of reminded me of when I grabbed that moth at 17 and shoved it in my mouth to kind of like impress people.
That's
I
what
was
Clay
like,
said.
I
Yeah.
don't know.
Speaking of which, I think he just answered this question. So I'm gonna see if you did or if you didn't.
He's mentioned
we
multiple things though, Clay.
Yeah.
So-
Okay. Well, we ask every guest, or I like to ask every guest, what is the worst wild edible food that you've ever eaten? Usually in an episode, we like to ask that. And you just said moth, and I don't know if that answers it.
I wouldn't really count the moth because that was kind of just a ridiculous thing, you know.
Okay.
I think it might be the muskrat.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah, I'm trying to think. Well, and of course, taste is subjective. I know people that swear that kidneys can be made into good things, but I've cooked up deer kidneys 2 or 3 times. I followed one of Hank Shaw's recipes from Buck Moose that's like it says like even people who don't like kidneys like this recipe or something like that, and it's like yeah, I still didn't like it. Um, yeah, I think it might be the muskrat. I'm trying to think of anything that I've maybe gotten sick off of that, but that's a whole different kind of experience. Just in terms of taste wise, though, it would probably be muskrat. But I mean, it's funny because we talk about wild foods as though they're somehow intrinsically different than store-bought foods.
Mhm.
When I eat papaya, there's something in papaya that just has like a vomity flavor to my palate.
Yeah.
And some people don't pick up on it. Maybe it's like cilantro where some people taste soap. I don't know, but there's things that I don't like. It's funny too because when I give wild food classes, a lot of people ask me like, "Oh, Chris Gavin, what's your favorite wild food?" And they always think I'm gonna say some obscure thing like swamp saxifrage flower stalks or something like that. I'm gonna say well, elk backstrap is my favorite wild food. People are kind of like, "Oh, I'm not talking about animals. I'm talking about like plants." and then I'll say like, "Oh, wild strawberry," and they're usually like, kind of surprised and like, "Oh, well, I like strawberry. We all like strawberries." Like, yeah, because they're delicious. So,
Yeah.
But I think muskrats probably. And there's a number of fish that the fishier the fish, the
Yeah.
and again that's a like I have neighbor just across. There's a trout stream right through my backyard, and my neighbor right across the way fishes so much more than I do because he loves the flavor of trout. And I just don't. And I understand that everybody's different. Like I know that there's not something objective about trout that I don't like that other people do, but trout is one of my least favorite things to eat, period. I've found a couple of recipes from the Alsatian region, like Alsace-Lorraine region of France bordering with Germany, where if you put like this creamy sauce and sauerkraut on it, it's like almost kind of okay. So
So I made an Eduardo Garcia smoked trout, not a dip, but a smoked trout like with some creme fraiche. It was like a smoked trout salad with like creme fraiche and dill and stuff like that. And I brined it for like 2 days or 3 days before I smoked it. And that was okay. It was still trouty. Like there was the essence of trout, but it was muted enough by those other things to where I was like, oh, it's palatable, you know? But like, I'll eat 2 trout a year and I'm done. I'll still take people fishing. I'll catch them. I'll give them to them. They want them. Hey, take them. And I only like trout fishing because it's like the first open water, you know, fishing of the season, really, it seems like, you know. And then, like, I'm not a huge crappie guy. Like, my dad's like, oh, I love crappie. I love crappie this. I would rather have bluegill or perch. I would. Not a huge walleye guy. I don't care for like the whole freshwater fish. To me, like a grouper, like a red grouper or like a mangrove snapper, a lane snapper, something like that. Yeah, way better to me than something like caught from a lake. I'll eat catfish too. I don't mind it. I think it's pretty good, especially when you fry it up. It loses a lot of that, you know, whatever. I want to come up with some different ways to cook it, you know, other than obviously just the traditional fry, but I prefer ocean caught fish over freshwater any day of the week.
I do too, 100%. And the ocean caught fish that I don't like the most would be like salmon, which where it's like it kind of takes on almost a strong flavor and even a little bit of
or a mackerel or something like the mackerel's super greasy and like not greasy but like oily, you know. I'm not a huge fan of that. I like a nice flaky white fish. Or like a tuna steak is really good too, you know.
Oh, tuna steaks are amazing.
Or wahoo or mahi-mahi or, you know, whatever.
Mahi-mahi, definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's one thing, like, generally speaking, I love the upper Midwest. But I and when I was growing up, I didn't really like fish that much. And I thought it was all fish, but it turns out I'm kind of picky about my freshwater fish. It's got to be prepared just right for me to find it to be like okay.
Yep. I'm the same way. I'd much rather eat a deer steak any day of the week than have a plate of fish.
I remember when a study came out of like, I don't know, 10, 15 years ago saying like, what was it? Red meat. Sausage consumption is tied to colon cancer or something like that. As soon as I read that study, I was like, well, now I know how I'm going to die.
Right.
I don't have a sweet tooth, but I've got a bacon cheeseburger tooth. Something fierce. One of my favorite rites of spring is to get like a Culver's bacon cheeseburger.
I saw that.
And put ramps on it. Oh man, that's like heaven right there.
I haven't done that yet. I need to do that. Try it.
Chris, do you live close to Lake Michigan where you get access to like those kind of fish?
Yeah, not terribly far. It's about 2-hour drive for me to get to like Port Washington, Milwaukee, Sheboygan area, where I could charter a boat out, and I have done that. And Great Lakes salmon are
don't like salmon. No, I don't care where it's from. I'm not a huge fan.
Well, they're definitely like not as good in my opinion as ocean salmon, and I actually am a fan of ocean salmon.
Nope. You won't ever catch me going to a restaurant, Clay, and ordering salmon.
You would catch me doing that a lot.
Nope.
I actually really like salmon, but I like lake trout And that's what I was getting at. Is like, do you like lake trout?
Just on that spectrum of things, I wouldn't say I like lake trout. I dislike lake trout less than some other freshwater fish. Um, One thing I like about lake trout is they lend themselves really well to smoking.
Mhm.
Because I mean, many fish do, but not all fish are equal for throwing on the smoker. And lake trout take to the smoker real well, in my opinion. Same with whitefish. I like whitefish better than lake trout,
Mhm.
even though they're all in the Salmonidae family. They're a little less salmony flavored. I'm with Luke. It's just like I eat salmon because it's good for me, and it can be wildly and sustainably sourced, and that's it. Like I don't, I buy it from the store on occasion. I don't get it at a restaurant because if I'm at a restaurant, I'm gonna get a steak or something like that. So
Yeah.
yeah, or better still, most often if I'm at a restaurant, I'm gonna get something that had to get shipped here, like mahi mahi,
Right,
or
right.
yeah, some get the lobster or something. So
Okay. What about burbot?
bourbon or burbot?
Burbot. Burbot.
Who doesn't
Burbot.
like bourbon? No, I'm just
I do like burbot. Yeah, I feel
Yeah.
like as far as freshwater fish go, it's one of the best.
Yeah.
I do like walleye though, and again, like even yellowtail snapper or something like that, I would go for cut of red meat over even ocean fish nine
Right.
times out of 10.
Me too.
But that's just but I've got friends who are like, oh, they just love pike, and it's like, yeah, everybody's different.
If they've got a 32-ounce bison T-bone versus,
Oh,
I know what
yeah,
I'm picking.
you're speaking my love language right now, Luke. It's like,
Yeah.
oh yeah,
Oh man.
yeah, with a nice sauce on top.
And a nice crust of salt, or yeah,
Yeah.
I know what I'm
Oh
doing.
yeah. Yeah. So yeah, I've never caught a burbot myself, but I have bought burbot from there's a little shop up in Cornucopia, Wisconsin,
Hmm.
that had some burbot for sale. And I gave it a try and I thought it was all right. So yeah,
Yeah.
I know it's in the cod family. When I took I took a Fishes of Wisconsin class for back in college, and everyone in the class was assigned a fish to do a special report on, and burbot was mine. So
Oh.
yeah, and I just like when I get assignments like that, I make fun of it. I don't just do the minimum. I go all in. So I learned about how burbot have a circumpolar distribution, and their skin is the preferred skin to use for windows in yurts in Mongolia. Back before, I mean, I'm sure these days they're using like clear vinyl or something like that, but
The plastics,
50,
microplastics, yeah.
but 50, 100 years ago, it was all burbot skin that they were using for the windows and the yurts and stuff like that. So pretty cool fish with that little single barbell under the chin. Yeah.
They're so ugly.
Yeah.
They're like one of the ugliest fish.
Those fish too, they have more common names than chromosomes. It's like cusk, lawyer, burbot, lingcod, eel pout. That's just crazy. And I think they're a fascinating case study in like how we view things, even in the similar cultures, but over small spatial areas, we can view things so differently. Because in Wisconsin, I'm almost certain that burbot are a rough fish. So you can take just about as many as you want. No size limits, nothing like that. You can spear for them.
I
Which
want to
is
spear so
what's that?
bad, but not like spear with like lights. I want to dive and spear so bad.
Yeah, yeah. I'm actually a little bit envious because well, I'll wrap up on the burbot real
Yeah,
quick. But
sorry.
you go over to Minnesota. No, it's totally cool. There's so many like different interconnected points for these stories. But you go over to Minnesota and they're game fish.
Hmm.
And they have a contest in one of their lakes for who can catch the biggest one, and they're regulated, and they over the course of decades, they've learned to view that resource differently than we do in Wisconsin. But to your point, Luke, I part of the reason why I'm kind of keen on picking up scuba diving is I really wouldn't mind doing some spearfishing. And right now I'm a little envious because in Clay's state of Michigan, you can spearfish for walleye. And in Wisconsin, you mentioned that to one of our anglers, and like you'll just watch them get all tied up in knots. And I really don't understand what's going on there because when you think about it, when you pull the trigger on a spear gun, that's it. You've sized up that fish. You know that you want to take it home with you. You know you're gonna kill it. You're gonna it'll be part of your bag limit, just like that. You know, whereas if you're casting for walleye, you don't know which ones you've got on the hook, and you've got to let some go, and there's got to be some mortality involved with catching them and releasing them. I'd much rather be under the water sizing them up, and the bag limit's gonna be the same either way. So, but I mean, you guys know how these things are, particularly with, I mean, all natural resources. But I do think as a sportsman, I can say that with sportsmen, there's a real big reluctance to change things, such that, you know, in Wisconsin, we do not hunt deer with dogs. And why not? We just don't do that. That's just how it is.
Or crossbows, Clay. No, I'm just kidding.
It's so hard to get people to change when it's, that's how their grandfather or their dad showed them how to do things. So.
Well, in the apocalypse, I'll be using my dog to hunt whatever is available.
Yep.
But I did want to at least lead us in the direction of saying our goodbyes, because we've been going for quite a while here.
Clay's tired. We can go forever.
Yeah. Well, I just here at my house anyway, we're approaching 11 p.m. I know that you guys are not. You're in Central Time.
Boo.
Yeah, but I do want to say,
Clay Downer is your new name.
Yeah, Clay the Downer, shutting down the podcast. No, but really, like, you are such a knowledgeable guy, Chris, and you're so valuable to the community. And I really wanted to say this earlier on.
And you only post about food.
Yeah. I wanted to say this though earlier on. What I really love about you, Chris, is that you are so good at talking to people like me, who maybe we don't agree on everything, but we can still remain friends and we can still be cordial with one another, even if we don't agree on every single aspect of everything.
Oh, absolutely. It amazes me how much in like American discourse, especially when you look at things like conservationists and environmentalists, you run into people who identify as environmentalists but not conservationists, or vice versa. And I identify as both, and so far as I identify at all, I don't really like labels per se, but it's like, you got to be kidding me. Like, the overlap of interests are like 90%.
Yeah.
So
there's so much common ground that we all have. We just have to sit down and tolerate each other long enough to bring those things up and talk about them, and we'll find we like each other so much more than we dislike each other, that we can all just get along. But nobody wants to do that anymore.
It is funny though, Luke, because you just mentioned I do mostly post food on the social media, and I do find that social media just is not one of the best platforms to talk about not just politics, but oftentimes even convictions of all kinds, because so few people, I think, are ready for a nuanced discussion on those platforms where and then to Clay's point,
it's echo chambers and comment warriors is what it is.
Yeah. And it's funny because I mean, I appreciate the compliment, Clay, when you said I'm knowledgeable. What I always try to go for is like acknowledging where those limits are, because I feel like that's where the growth edge is in knowing that you don't know. I know a good bit in large part because I'm very aware of the things that I am not aware of, or the things that are really limiting, like the areas that I really shouldn't go deep into because I don't know very much. And then I get quiet. Then I turn on my listening. I go into listener mode when it's topics that I don't really know. So, I mean, if we had gone in a different direction, if we had spent this whole podcast talking about fishing, it would have been great for me because I would have learned stuff. But I would have shifted. You would not have walked away from the experience thinking I'm so incredibly knowledgeable if the topic had been fishing, because I would have been taking notes instead. And
there would have been crickets all around then, Chris, because there's a lot that I don't know, and I constantly, ask my dad. I remember when we used to do this, and we used to just catch fish left and right, and why can't I do that now? Or why am I not getting on them right? And he's like, I don't know. You just do this and that and whatever. And like my dad still just goes out, and I mean, he's an angler. He is not a hunter at all, but he's an angler, and he's good at it. But I'm the okayest angler.
I suck at it. I'm definitely not. I would have been learning right there with you, Chris.
As bad as hunting, Clay, or worse?
Fishing?
Yeah.
Yeah,
No, I'm just kidding.
yeah.
I'm kidding.
I'm
It was
way
a
worse.
joke.
I'm way worse at fishing. Yeah.
I suspect if I spent as much time angling as I do foraging and hunting, though, it would be a different story because, after those first few years of a real steep learning curve, and this is probably the same for you guys, but when you're up in that tree stand, you start, like, after several years, you start to get like a sixth sense, right? And you're just like, I think something might wander up soon, and I rarely get that sense and something doesn't wander up. I think that, Luke, your dad's just spent enough time that he can read the water.
I don't know. Yeah, I don't know. Or presentation. Him and I will be throwing the same bait. And maybe my retrieval rate or my ADD, and I'm looking at other things and not paying attention to what I'm doing with that bait. I don't know. But he'll be over there catching 20 fish on the same exact bait that I'm throwing. And then I'm over there and I get like 2 maybe, and it's like, how is it? What are you doing?
Yep.
And it's just, I mean, he senses, he feels the line more than I do. I don't know, but yeah, it's way different.
Thank you.
Well, gentlemen, it has been so much fun. I feel like we've been talking for like 10 minutes.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
Yeah. Well, Chris, how do people get in touch with you?
Yeah, mostly via social media. I've got an Instagram account, eagle_outdoor_skills. I've got a Facebook page, Eagle Outdoor Skills. I don't do TikTok. To be honest, like, right where I am even with social media right now is like, I could push it more. I could try to trip the algorithms and stuff like that, but to be honest, I find that if I had much more of a presence, it would kind of start running contrary to all the core values that have pushed me into the outdoors and have me going out hunting and foraging anyway. So yeah, if people want to get in touch with me, I'm like, I think this year it's down to just 3 unidentified phone numbers who I'm their like mushroom guy, where they send me mushroom pics. And I'm like, I don't even know who I'm talking to. I don't know how they got my number and whatnot. But if people want to get in touch with me, if somebody's listening to this podcast, they're probably my kind of person. So we can connect on social media, or I'm not too hard to dig up an email address on or something like that. So yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah, that's awesome. And one more thing, you should really start doing some like Instagram or TikTok reels where you're like shaking and
No, Clay. No.
I think that would be
no.
Imagine Chris doing that.
No, no, because that's not him. It's not you either. You do it because it's for the lover likes thing, and that's not me, and that's why I don't really do it. I've done like 1 or 2, and I'm like, I may be like, I may be the funny guy or I'm not the funny guy. Maybe I'm the sarcastic guy and I think it's funny sometimes, but it's really not. It's more snarky. But I don't know. That's not me, So I'm not doing it. And half the time, like, as you know, the past 6 months, I've hardly posted anything. And it's more or less just I'm wrapped up in what I do and I'd rather just do it. And I've got so many pictures on my phone that I took just because it was something cool or enthralled me at the moment. And I've got it, and I'm like, oh, man, I should really probably post that. And then I forget about it, and I go on to the next thing,
Oh, I can so relate, Luke. I actually ran into someone just a couple weeks ago, maybe a month or two ago, and she said, oh, I noticed you haven't been eating a whole lot of wild foods lately. And I was like, what are you like, how would you know? And she's like, well, you just haven't been posting as much lately. And I'm just like, social media is not the real world.
Right.
And if you were to go back and double check, you will rarely, if ever, see me post any. I mean, I eat venison every other day, or wild mushrooms every other day. I'm eating wild foods every single day. But if you look, I don't post on Mondays. I don't post on Tuesdays. I rarely post on Thursdays, because those are the days where the second I'm done eating, whether I took a picture of my meal or not, I'm rushing out the door to get to some scout meeting, or teaching some merit badge or something like that. Life's too busy to maintain, like, to live via social media. And I don't judge people who become influencers. Like, I just know that won't work for me. Just like I don't judge people who decide not to have kids. That didn't work for me. And I would hope that, and back to Clay's point of like, hey, we can disagree on things. I've run into plenty of people who say, oh, having children is environmentally irresponsible. And I was like, for you, like that.
For you? Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And it's, I just, everybody does things differently. I can't imagine a world without my kids, but I can imagine that other people couldn't imagine a world with kids, in their family unit. So everybody's different, but for me, social media is, I'm definitely just about maxed out on what I could do for it. And then a few years back, I did some like cooking videos when I was a brand ambassador for Hunt to Eat, and man, that was a learning curve. Do you guys like maybe remember like tape recorders and taping your voice and listening to it for the first time in like middle school, and you play back your voice and it's like, I sound like that? Oh man, the first video I ever took of myself like cooking a wild meal, it was like all stiff and yeah, I don't think I'm very good on the camera, and one could say that that's where the growth edge is, but I've got growth edges left and right. I mean, you guys know how it is. The natural world is, it's just an infinite sink for your sense of wonder. I don't have time to go around correcting people on social media or telling people they should look into this, that, or any other thing. I've got like way too many books to read, cool things to learn about. Everything from spruce trees to raccoon penis bones and everything in between. Like, yeah, there's too much life to live. So
you just reminded me, I have a baculum out back sitting on a branch that I had set there in the winter time. I got to go see if it's still there.
What's it from?
A raccoon.
A raccoon.
Nice.
I think I've got my first otter floating around somewhere. So
you're gonna use it to clean your primer pocket or your musket.
A toothpick.
Yeah.
Yeah, sharpen one end, use it as a toothpick. Yeah. No. Well, anyway, dude, it's been a pleasure talking to you, Chris, and I really hope that we can have you back on again in a little while to catch up again.
Anytime.
Awesome.
It's always fun talking. I enjoy it every time.
It's great. Yeah, and hopefully I'll see you guys in person sometime soon too. It's always fun when our paths cross.
Absolutely.
Yep.
Yeah. All right. Well, you guys take care.
You too.
And once again, thank you so much for listening to the Publicly Challenged podcast. I hope you enjoyed the show, and if you did, please subscribe on whatever platform it is you're listening to. Also, if you could leave a review, that would help us out. And you can check us out on Instagram or at publiclychallenged.com. And once again, thank you so much for listening to the show.